can go when the computer tells me I go. Okay, the computer says it's fine. Got to take my cues from the giant, mighty computer. Good evening, everyone. It is nice to see everybody back here. This is our first Pathway to Judaism course of the new year, new Jewish year, 5780. And some of you have come to the courses that were at the end of last year's cycle. Some of you, this might be the beginning, especially for those of you watching online. So it is a full process. Not everything needs to be done in a particular order. I do try to follow a certain order because I think it's helpful. And I do also try to line up some of the classes with holidays that are coming up in the calendar and things like that. But if you were here for some of the classes in last spring or last winter, and now you're finishing up by doing the autumn parts of it, that's perfectly fine. And as always, when we go through this, the more questions you have, the more you'll get out of this. And questions can be asked in class. Questions can also be asked by email, text, or any other means of communication that you enjoy. I know no one's going to write me a letter, but you know, who knows? Maybe they will. So today's class is going to be a real sort of beginning class of this is what we are about to do. And so with that in mind, let's get things underway. So the class parameters, get rid of that, thank you. The class parameters, everyone is welcome to this class, right? There is no charge, there is no fee, and you don't need any special credentials to come through that door. If you are interested in conversion, great. Some people who don't happen to have been born Jewish would like to become Jewish. This class is, I believe, a very good resource for helping you to make that decision and be prepared for that decision. And this will allow you to learn that path. Some people, on the other hand, just want to know more about Judaism, right? They've been Jewish their whole life. They've learned some, but maybe they want to know more. Or some have learned quite a bit, but they'd like to add to that. There's no end to the amount of learning that we can do. And I do find that every time I re-examine a subject, there is always something I'm learning. So if I'm learning something new, then everyone else can be learning something new too. So really this class can have lots of different participants. Classes are 6 p.m. Thursday. You all know that because you got here on time. We will cancel class for holidays. That means Jewish or secular holidays. So that means, yes, you get Thanksgiving off. We won't have class on Thanksgiving. And if there are other holidays and such, then I'll always announce it the week before, at least, if not further, to let you know. Sometimes there are also special events, and I'll give you a heads up if there's a congregational activity that's going to need me to be attending, and then I won't be able to do the class that Thursday. Please register. Register just means you call or email the office. You give them your name and your contact information. That way, if there is a problem, if I'm sick or something happens and the class is canceled, they can contact you and you won't drive out here and be left in the dark. If you were signed up last year, please do it again because they keep a roster per year. And so even if you were signed up last year, please contact them so that your name can go on the list for the new roster. That way we don't keep calling people who were here last year that have finished or so on and so forth. Make sense? All right, that's all basic.
So, and the registration is with, you just call the temple?
Just call the temple.
And ask for the bookkeeper or who?
No, you just talk to Catherine or to Israel. There are office, the administration, the manager or the receptionist, they can put you in the spreadsheet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't need to talk to the bookkeeper because there's no cost.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Now, conversion is one of the biggest reasons that many people take this course. So let me take a little bit more about what goes into conversion in addition to coming to this class. Because Judaism is not merely an academic discipline, right? If you want to learn French poetry, going to a French poetry class is pretty much going to do it for you. But if you want to learn Judaism and eventually embrace Judaism, you're going to need more than this class. So what else is going on? Well, coming to services on Fridays and Saturdays each month. I know that not everyone can arrange their schedule yet because you're still in a flux where you don't have Friday or Saturday off, but as often as you can, coming to services, either with us or with other congregations, sometimes a good idea so you can experience different styles of Judaism. But being part of that service is very, very important. Reading the Torah portion on your own. We read the Torah every year. We just resumed the reading and we're already 3 parshas in, 3 Torah sections in. This is a big part of us digging deeper into the text each and every year. And it is a spiritual journey every time we do it. And it is something that is very essential to Jewish understanding. Now, if you don't own a copy of the Torah, if you don't own a copy of the Bible, it's okay. We're going to talk a little bit later on about some copies you can get. And we're also going to talk about some free resources online or just more convenient resources if you'd rather carry this around than that around.
For coming to services, do I have to come specifically here, or can I also attend services at Chabad for Friday and Saturday?
You can attend elsewhere, but it is also good because I know that that's much closer to UCF. I know that it's also very important, however, to attend services that are in the conservative movement, because there are some differences, most notably your ability to sit and participate with the full congregation. But there are other aspects to our service that if you're going to be converting through the conservative movement, it's going to be good to know. So definitely good, and I want you to stay part of your circle of friends and other people that you have over there by UCF. But from time to time, you definitely want to come here too, because there are differences that you're going to want to be aware of. Good. So coming to services, reading the Torah portion on your own. Begin to practice some of what we learn here. So we're going to cover all sorts of topics, whether it be the topics of keeping kosher and keeping Shabbat and doing holidays, whether it be issues of how we talk to other people, how we interact with other people to be kind and proper, giving the tzedakah, usually called charity, things like that. As we go through different topics, gradually try to integrate them, try to pick them up as new parts of your life, new habits to be pursued. Don't expect yourself to take each week's lesson and say, okay, I'm going to do everything now, no problem, everything is going to be my life, and every week I'm adding all the stuff that Rabbi Neely was talking about. That's usually a little unreasonable. It's usually much healthier to take it step by step as you add little by little from different parts. Some things you'll find will come very easily. Some things you'll find come with more difficulty. Some things you'll find will come eventually, but not right now. And that is perfectly normal and a natural part of the growing process. Attending Jewish social and cultural events here or throughout the community is also very important. One of the things that's very hard for people to sometimes understand is that when you become Jewish, you're not merely embracing a particular relationship between yourself and God, you are also embracing a relationship between yourself and other Jewish people. And I have to tell you that embracing God is sometimes easier, because we all know God is infinitely patient, accepting, and understanding. Other people, not always so much. We're actually going to see a few examples of the lack of understanding a little bit later. So getting a feeling for being part of this extended community, which is not only in Orlando, but is national and international, is part of what it means to understand this commitment. The covenant that God made with us, the Brit, and I'll keep sprinkling Hebrew and translating it back and forth throughout the classes. Part of that covenant is with us, not with me, meaning that God asked us to take Torah. God asked us to be a nation together. God didn't ask each individual, he asked the collective group. And there are many things in Judaism that we only do best when we have a community around us. Let me just check my tech support. No, everything's good. My wife often watches from home and she'll let me know if there's a problem with the internet system. So involving yourself in Jewish book clubs, Israeli dance, going to speakers in the community, or attending other types of social or cultural events is a good way to get a feel for Judaism beyond the confines of this building and what I'll be teaching you. And it's also a good way to simply make Jewish friends, to get to know other people in the community, because that is very, very important. Also, beginning to learn Hebrew on your own or as part of our Sunday class. Fanny Cernick teaches our adult Hebrew Sunday class, and yes, you would count as an adult, it's okay. And if you would like to do that, there is a fee because we do compensate her and we make materials available, so that you would need to register again through the office. I think we're still at $36 for the semester, which is a bargain. She is great. Hebrew is not essential, but it's essential. That is to say, Hebrew is something that it will open up your understanding of Judaism to a whole nother level. Whether it's just the decoding, which is learning what the alphabet is and how to pronounce the words, or even more importantly, once you get into the comprehension of it, it simply allows you to access more of what Judaism is trying to say with less between you and the ideas. As soon as something is translated, there is always at least a veil of someone else's ideas, someone else's opinion, someone else's interpretation. When you have the Hebrew, you are much more an equal member of that conversation rather than listening to someone else fill you in on the conversation. It's not essential in the sense that it won't hold you back from eventually converting, but it will definitely speed up the process of absorbing the information the more you can learn. And thankfully, Hebrew is a much more logical language than English. It may not seem that way when you first start, but I promise you, as someone who taught English to foreigners for 3 years, I would much rather teach Hebrew than teach English, because Hebrew just makes a lot more sense when you're learning it. The rules are much more regular. The pronunciation is understandable. It just simply is, and the logic of how the words are formed is much easier too. But I know that it is a foreign language, and foreign languages are not always everybody's cup of tea. But do try and stick with it. You will get there. But it's one of those things that needs practice. Because if you do like one letter of the alphabet this week and then one letter next week, you'll forget the first letter. It takes nice 10-minute, 15-minute daily exercise.
Are the nikud or vowel markings taught?
Yes. So we teach both. We teach basically how to use with the nikud. We do both decoding, but also comprehension. We have 2 different levels, a beginners and an intermediate. But the goal eventually would be that if you learn the language well enough, you don't really need the vowels for most circumstances. But yes, Morris Cernick does cover how to handle those vowels. Yeah, which definitely seems to be one of the sticking points for a lot of people, because it's just such a weird idea of having vowels be separate symbols rather than letters. But I promise you get the hang of it and it makes sense. I promise. And then you get so good you don't even need it. All right, we'll talk more about the conversion process formally. That is to say, what actually is needed to convert according to Jewish law, what we call halakha, Jewish law. But we'll save that for a whole nother class. Good? Any questions so far? Okay. So what we are going to talk about is the feeling of what it means to come to Judaism and not know anything. Because this is a feeling that many people will often have. Some people who are converting and coming with no background at all, or some people who were raised Jewish, but they didn't really learn a whole lot when they were a kid, and maybe they became disattached from the community during their high school, college, and young adult years, and now they're returning and they're looking for something and they're not sure what to get. Well, throughout history, that's happened more than once. That's not something new. And not surprisingly, in the Talmud, and we will talk in not next week, but the following week about the whole hierarchy of books and our Jewish library, because knowing how that library fits together is going to be very helpful for integrating new material. But in the Talmud, which is, take it for the today, a very important book, that's about 1,500 years old, they have 3 different stories of 3 different people who came to try and learn about Judaism. These are 3 people who want to convert. So our rabbis taught, that's a typical beginning for a passage in the Talmud. A certain Gentile once came before Shammai. Shammai was one of the most famous rabbis of his generation. He lived in the decades before the destruction of the Second Temple, and we're going to cover history later too. The Second Temple was destroyed in the year 70 CE. By the way, we do use CE and BCE rather than AD and BC. CE stands for Common Era, and BCE stands for before the Common Era. That way, when we're talking about our dates, even though they are synchronized to the secular calendar, it is actually secular rather than using terms that are referring specifically to someone else's God. In the decades before 70 CE, Shammai would have lived just around the year 0. Someone came and asked him, "How many Torahs do you have?" And Shammai responded, 2, the written Torah and the oral Torah. All right, now we'll talk about this again in 2 weeks' time when we talk about the hierarchy of texts and how that all fits together. But basically, Judaism believes that God gave us a written Torah. That's what's on those beautiful scrolls that are in our sanctuary. But as anybody who's ever tried to read a book will tell you, the explanation needs to go along with it if you are to understand the book correctly. And that's what we call the oral Torah. That is the chain of tradition of teacher to pupil, of family to child, throughout the generations of saying, when the Torah says this, this is what it means. So really, you can't get everything you need from the written Torah without someone trying to help you understand it and without them teaching you verbally, orally, what it actually means. We'll talk about that in much more detail later. But Shammai is explaining that, yes, we have the written Torah, and then we have the explanation of the written Torah. We have the written Torah and the oral Torah. And the convert, or the person who wants to convert, responds, "I believe you with respect to the written, but not with the respect to the oral Torah." Basically meaning, I will accept the written thing, but I'm not going to listen to what you're talking about in the explanation. I don't think that's legitimate. That's not from God. Right? That's maybe you're making that up. I don't know. But I'll believe the words. I won't believe your explanation. Okay. Make me a convert then on the condition that you teach me the written Torah only. But he scolded and repulsed him in anger. So basically Shammai's like, get out of here. You're wasting my time. What do you mean you want me to only teach you the written but not teach you the oral? You jerk, get out of here. Shammai is notorious for this kind of attitude. He is a kind of harsh personality. On the other hand, the convert went before Hillel, and some of you who know about campus life will know that Hillel is the name of the Jewish outreach organization on American college campuses. And it's precisely because Hillel was a much more patient and outgoing kind of person, very different than Shammai. You wouldn't find the Shammai outreach center on campus. So he went before Hillel, and Hillel accepted him as a convert, right? So Hillel apparently goes ahead and converts this guy on the conditions that this guy had laid down. Right? I'm only going to do the written, not to do the oral. And Hillel's like, okay, we'll do that. We'll do that. Okay, a little surprise if you're a reader of this. On the first day, he taught him Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Right? He's teaching him the Aleph, Bet, because you got to learn the Aleph, Bet if you're going to learn everything. And on the following day, Hillel reversed it, right? So he taught him Dalet, Gimel. Basically, what he said was an Aleph one day. He's now saying it's a Bet the next day, which is, if you're a student, really annoying, right? The teacher just changed what he was teaching. That is bad. And the teacher says, the student says, but yesterday you did not teach them to me thus, right? You taught me differently. At which point Hillel responds, must you then not rely upon me? Now, I apologize that the Talmud speaks often in truncated language, but basically what Hillel is trying to say is, yeah, you're right. And when I taught you Aleph, Bet, Gimel, you have to trust me that an Aleph is an Aleph, a Bet is a Bet, and a Gimel is a Gimel. So when I teach you, this is what the Torah says about murder, this is what the Torah says about theft, when I teach you, in addition to what you see in the text with your own eyes, you have to trust me there too. Right? That is what it means to learn. There is always the written and the oral, and you can't say, I'm not going to trust you on the oral. Because if you trust me even on an Aleph Bet, you're trusting me on the oral. You're trusting that what I'm giving you will help you understand. And you can't have one without the other. So, Hillel, score 1, right? He takes this guy who was stubborn and obnoxious and clearly confused about what it means to learn, he brings them in and teaches him and gives him a wonderful example that you may think that you only want to learn A, but really you need A and B if it's going to be successful. And this, of course, is true in the modern world as well. Many people will come and they'll say, well, how do I know rabbinic Judaism is really valid? Can't I just read this for myself? And blah, 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 blah. And every historical era that has tried to do that ends up recreating their own oral explanation. If you look at the Karaites, which was an ancient Jewish splinter group, they said, we don't want to do any of this rabbinic stuff, right? We can read the Torah and we'll come up with our answers on our own. Within a generation, they had come up with their own book to explain the Torah. Right? They had reinvented the wheel. Same thing happened when the Protestants broke away from the Catholic Church. Right? Martin Luther said, everybody will be their own priest, meaning everyone can interpret the Bible as they want. It turned out that when everyone interpreted the Bible, they ended up splintering into different directions. Right? And some groups would agree, and then they would have their new version of this is how to interpret the Bible. And other groups would have a different idea of how to interpret the Bible. And then you became Lutheran and Presbyterian and Methodist and all the different Protestant groups that branched out as each group had their own interpretation. Rabbinic Judaism is our interpretation. And the conservative movement in particular is my version of that interpretation. And this is what my teachers taught me because their teachers taught them, and so on, all the way back to Hillel and Shammai. So, person number 2. On one occasion, it happened that a certain Gentile, a certain non-Jew, came before Shammai. I don't know why they keep going to him first. Makes for a good story, though. They came to Shammai and said to him, make me a convert on condition that you teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot. All right, now, if you're wondering how long does it take to convert, well, usually I ask that people will be involved in the community and study for about a year. That's a long time to stand on one foot. So basically what this person is asking is convert me by teaching me everything I need to know while I'm standing on one foot. Right? I want the Cliff Note version, or what do they call it? The Spark Notes. When I was young, they were Cliff Notes. Now they're called Spark Notes. Right? Give me the 2-page synopsis, the Judaism in a nutshell, which, by the way, we often do on Saturdays. And that's good. Right? Don't give me the long version. Give me the short, concise, brief. Thereupon, he repulsed him with a builder's cubit, which is basically like a yardstick, and smacked the guy and get out of here. You're wasting my time. What do you mean teach you while standing on one foot? This idiot. Okay, guess what happens next? He went before Hillel. And Hillel said to him, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah. Right? You can learn that on one foot. Right? What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. Even I can stand on one foot long enough to be able to say that. But the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Now, again, we see the brilliance of Hillel. He is able to give a one-sentence explanation of the entirety of Torah and Judaism that, if you unpack it, will cover everything else. But he points out you need to unpack it. And he doesn't say that this bumper sticker, what is hateful to you, don't do to others, is the only thing you need to know. He just says, you know, if you really wanted to squish it down, this would be a good one-sentence synopsis. But you don't want to squish it down. You need to expand it so that you understand how it applies to every situation in life and get the most benefit from it. So, again, Hillel finds a way to bring the guy in, even while also correcting him, even while also pointing him in the right direction, so that he stops with his stupid on one foot nonsense. But rather than just saying you're stupid, he says, fine, I'll meet your condition, and then I will show you the right direction to go after. Questions? Comments? Yeah. If you're learning to like Hillel, good. Person number 3. On one occasion, a Gentile was passing behind a house of study. Right? He's going by what we call the Beit Midrash, a room like this. And he's listening because they didn't have solid windows. They just had openings in the wall. And he heard the voice of a teacher saying, and this is taken from the book of Exodus, and these are the garments which they shall make, a breastplate and an ephod. Right? These are the garments that were worn by the high priest. And the Torah describes them in great detail, and the gold and the cloth and the gems and all these things. Said he, for whom are these, right? Who gets to wear that, right? That sounds pretty spiffy. Who gets to wear that stuff? For the high priest, he was told. Then he said, the Gentile to himself, I'll go and I'll convert that I can become the high priest. Now, there's a problem here, right? To be a high priest, you have to be a Kohen, right? Or if you know Mr. Cohen, that's somebody who is born from the family Kohen. And the magic word there is born, right? To become a priest within Judaism, not a rabbi, but a priest, you have to be born into a particular family, into a Kohen family. And there are lots of them around the world. Thank God we've got plenty of them. Sometimes it seems we have extra. You can't be made a Kohen, right? I wasn't born a Kohen. I can never become a Kohen. Right? I can never become a priest. And if someone's converting, they definitely can't become a priest. They can become a rabbi, and indeed we have many rabbis in rabbinic literature who were converts, who were born not Jewish and came to Judaism and eventually achieved the learning necessary to be a rabbi. But you can't become a priest. So with this guy thinking, I'm going to convert so I can become a priest, the reader is like, uh-oh, that's not going to work so well. So what happened? He went to Shammai, and he said to Shammai, make me a convert on the condition that you appoint me to be a high priest. But he repulsed him with the builder's cubit, which was in his hand. So again, he shoos the guy off with a ruler. Okay, we all know what's coming next. So he went to Hillel. And what did Hillel do? Hillel said, sure, I'll convert you. No problem. Your condition, sure, no problem. And he said to him, as he's now studying, can any man be made a king, but he who knows the arts of government? Go and study the arts of government. So what Hillel is trying to say here is, okay, so you want to convert so you can become a priest, but we don't make just anybody a priest. To become a priest, you have to actually learn what's involved. So that's the next thing for you to study. So go off and study how to become a priest, and then we'll take the next step together. So the convert went and he read, and then he came to the passage in the Torah which says, and the stranger that approaches the tabernacle, the Mishkan, the tent where the sacrifices were done by the priests, where the high priest served, shall be put to death. And so the convert says to himself, to whom does this verse apply? Or he asked, well, who does this verse apply? And he says, even to David, king of Israel, right? David, if he wanted to go into the Holy of Holies of the temple, he would be killed. Right? Even the king can't do what the high priest can do because the king wasn't born into the right family. Thereupon the convert reasoned, and he said, from lesser to greater. This is what's known as a kal v'chomer argument. It's a logical argument that's commonly used in Jewish reasoning, which is if it fits for a weak case, then for a strong case, it certainly must fit. Right? If I'm not going to go out when it's raining, I'm certainly not going to go out in a hurricane. Right? So that's what's known as a kal v'chomer, from a lesser to greater case. If, which is the intonation we often use when doing rabbinic discussions, if of Israel, who are called the sons of the omnipresent, the sons of God, and who in his love for them, he designated them, Israel is my son, my firstborn, if about them it is written, and the stranger that approaches shall be put to death, how much more so a mere convert who comes with his staff and wallet? So coming with a staff and wallet was if you were coming for different services, for example, on Shabbat, you would leave your traveling stuff behind because we don't carry things like that on Shabbat. But somebody who wasn't Jewish, of course, would. So he's like, wait, even Jewish people aren't allowed to do this. Me, who's just becoming Jewish, how would I even think that I could do this? So he recognizes then, and he said, then he went before Shammai and said to him, am I then eligible to be a high priest? Is it not written in the Torah, and the stranger that approaches shall be put to death? And he went before Hillel and said to him, O gentle Hillel, blessings rest on your head for bringing me under the wings of the divine presence. And forgot to a little note there. So what he realizes by actually studying is that, yeah, there are some things he can't do that he thought he was going to do. And Hillel understood that if he just pushed him and said, no, you're stupid, don't ask that the guy would leave and never come to understand Judaism. So instead, he put up with what might be considered a dumb question or a dumb condition in order that the person would have enough time to eventually study and realize that what they were asking wasn't exactly possible. And by the time they understood that, they would be okay with that answer. They would have realized that that answer does make sense. And that's a very important thing to remember. As it finishes off in the Talmud, sometime later the three, meaning the three converts from all these three stories, they got together. Right? They had a little party and said, hey guys, remember when we were all converting? And they said, Shammai's impatience sought to drive us from the world. Right? If it was up to Shammai, we would have been like thrown out of the world. But Hillel's gentleness brought us under the wings of the divine presence. That's the basic philosophy that I use for this class. Whether someone is born Jewish or whether someone is choosing to become Jewish, is there's no such thing as a dumb question. Well, that's not true. There are some dumb questions. But the question you need to ask isn't a dumb question. And asking a question in this room should always be a safe experience. Or if there's something more private and personal, if you either want to email me or make an appointment to have a personal conversation, that's fine too. Because you're going to have questions. And some of them will be based on misconceptions or misunderstandings, and that's fine. Ask them anyway. And then they can be straightened out and things can be lined up. Sometimes I'll tell you that you'll have to wait a little bit to understand, because not every answer is immediately understandable without a lot of other learning to build up to it, like our good friend who wanted to be the high priest. But every question that you have should be answered eventually. Because we believe that questioning is how we learn. It's how we are involved. It's how we show our connection and our passion to a subject. So you should never feel that you should be passive. You should never feel that your question doesn't deserve an answer, or that your question is somehow not important enough to bother me or the other students with. Because any question you have will help all of us understand something a little bit better by having been brought to the table. So please, all three of these guys found their way, even though they were in pretty silly positions. No one here is that clueless. So all of us definitely have the right to come, ask, discuss, and share whatever needs to be shared to make this work. Clear? Okay, any questions? All right, back to some practical things. Books, books, books. We like books in Judaism, right? Books are great because books have absorbed knowledge that can then be passed on to other people. Now, a living person is great and in many ways is better than a book, because the book doesn't know if you understand what the book told you, whereas a human being can say, do you understand? And then you can say no, and then they can help you get through it. That's why when you go to school, they don't just drop a pile of books on the desk and then say, come back when you're ready to graduate. They want to have this be back and forth. However, there are many things that can be learned from a book faster than sitting in a class. So the first thing you're going to definitely need is the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the Hebrew word for the Bible. It's an acronym. Again, we'll talk about this in a couple of weeks, but it's the Torah, Nevi'im, that's the N from Nach, which is the book of prophets, and Ketuvim is the ch at the end, and when you learn Hebrew, you'll understand why that's actually the same letter, and that's Ketuvim, the writings. So the Jewish Bible is divided up into those three sections, which based on their content, not necessarily chronology. That's different than the way, for example, the Christians will order their Bible. Our Bible is by topic more than by particular order of history. So you're going to need a Tanakh, and a Tanakh is really, really quite essential, because you need not just the Torah, but it is important to have the rest of the Bible as well as part of your library. The Siddur, this is the prayer book. There are lots and lots of Siddurim. The ones that we use here for Shabbat is known as Lev Shalem. It's a beautiful Siddur with lots of instructions, lots of notes. You can buy it online. I don't know if we have extra copies to sell at the moment, because we order some and then we sell them and we order and sell. So I'm not sure where we are in our stock, but you can check with the office if they have any available. But that only covers Shabbat and festivals. You're also going to need a weekday Siddur, a Siddur that lets you do things for the rest of the week, not only on Shabbat and festivals. Personally, I recommend the Siddur Sim Shalom, S-I-M Shalom, S-H-A-L-O-M, which is another Siddur by the conservative movement. It doesn't have quite as many notes. It doesn't have quite as much extra information in it, but it is still a very clear and good translation, and it has everything that you could possibly want in it. It covers every situation. And that's good to have that. And we'll talk about the Siddur in more detail of why Jews like to have written down prayers rather than just being all spontaneous. There is room for spontaneity, but we do need a system.
Actually, I was going to ask you about that.
Uh-huh.
Like the prayers normally are written.
Yes.
And you can follow. And I have the sensation or the feeling that there is no room for my own thing.
Right. So we'll talk about prayer in much more detail in a future class. But the short answer is that even though the prayers are written down, that's meant to be the starting point. It's like the introduction to a topic. So if you're reading one of the prayers that is about thanking God, yes, there's a paragraph of text, but we also need to give our own thanks of things that are particular to us. The written text makes sure that we don't leave anything out, and it makes sure that we think about things differently than if we were just left to our own ideas, but it's not meant to stop our own thoughts and our own words. So we should always be adding in our own thoughts and prayers as well. But
it's basically praise.
Yeah, prayers, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, the observant life. The observant life is one of the most recent volumes from the conservative movement that tries to explain how to actually do Judaism in the modern world, right? There's lots of questions of how do I keep the holidays? How do I keep kosher? How do I act as a good spouse? How do I act as a good citizen? The observant life takes 3,000 years of Jewish tradition and tries to put it into one book about that thick that doesn't only tell you what to do, but also gives a fair amount of why this is what we do, of explanation. So it is a great resource if you want to look up a particular topic of what do we do and why do we do it. However, sometimes you just want to know, what do I do, right? It's coming time for Friday night. It's time to light the candles. How do I do that? What's the prayer again? What do I do? The Jewish Home Advisor is a great book for that because it is a quick, easy, like little encyclopedia to just look up the prayers, know how to do something, know how to handle a ritual. I'm going to put a mezuzah on my door. How do I do that? Jewish Home Advisor is a great reference book. The Observant Life will tell you more about why you're putting the mezuzah up and what that means and what it has been for us historically. But the Jewish Home Advisor is your quick reference for when you need something on the go. We see the difference between the two books? Good. A History of the Jews is still mostly the best one-volume history of Judaism. It's hard to do Judaism in one volume, right? Because Judaism, like I said, is at least 3,000 years old, depending upon how you want to count. And doing 3,000 years of world history in one book is almost impossible. But Paul Johnson in History of the Jews does a pretty good job. Right? It's not great. It's not perfect because anytime you're writing one volume books of all of Jewish history, you're going to be cutting out way too much. But at least for getting a sketch of it is good. Now, if you want something even shorter to get yourself started and to try and make sense of everything that we talk about and learn, and we reference 1500s and 800s and all of these different people, A Jewish History for Dummies is actually a pretty good book. Right? It is not a dumb book, even though it's short. So it is a very good, very short synopsis of Jewish history. And you know, worth it if you're really starting from scratch, especially if you don't remember much from your, history classes at school about, what was going on in Mesopotamia and what was going on in the Muslims and what was going on with the Crusades and with Europe. If you don't remember any of that, that might be a good place to start. Okay, the Commentator's Bible. The Commentator's Bible is a very expensive but very nice resource. I'm going to talk about a free version in just a second, but we like books too. So the Commentator's Bible is put out by the Jewish Publication Society, JPS, and what it tries to do is capture the traditional method of study in Jewish history, which is you have a piece of Torah text surrounded by commentary from multiple different sources. And we'll talk eventually about some of the most famous commentators, but this allows you to explain the text as you read it, rather than sitting there going, what in the world does that mean? Because there are plenty of places in the Torah that even if you have a good translation, that doesn't mean you have a good understanding. And the Commentator's Bible tries to duplicate what used to be only available in Hebrew with English. Now, like I said, it's an expensive set. Each book is like $50. Sometimes they do sales, so you can sign up for their list, and eventually you'll find a sale. But it's about 50 each, and there are 5 books of the Torah, so you're looking at like $250 for this set. That's pricey, right? And I get that. But we're going to talk about some of the other free versions in just a minute. Back to the sources. We have lots of books. Back to the Sources is still one of the best books that explains the books. What it does is it goes chapter by chapter and covers a different book. So there'll be a chapter on the Tanakh, there'll be a chapter on the Siddur, there'll be a chapter on the Mishnah, on the Talmud, on Jewish law codes, and it'll teach you how did each one of those talk? What is their style of their writing? What is the purpose of their writing? A little bit about their history and more about how they are used throughout Judaism. So it is a great book, about that thick, not too bad, for explaining all the other books. Good? Good. The Jewish holidays, a guide and commentary. We have a lot of holidays. All right, if you haven't got that yet, you're going to find that out. We have a lot of holidays. We just finished a whole bunch, but there are more coming. So understanding the holidays and how the whole cycle fits together is something we'll cover, but I can't go over every custom and every aspect and every teaching and every feeling of the spirit of each of those holidays in the classes we have. It would take more than a year to do all of them. Thankfully, this is a very good book that does a great job of bringing that all together. For those of you that prefer Spanish as your primary language, if you're looking for a Siddur prayer book, there's one called Kol Tuv, and it's a Spanish Hebrew Siddur. It's actually the one we use here for our Latino Shabbat, which happens once a month. And it's available online, www.koltuvsfarad.com /Siddur. And you can actually get a PDF of the book. And that's a great resource if Spanish is your native language. Okay, we're good on the books? Okay. Yes.
I've got a friend who kind of reminded me
Right.
Is that something?
Absolutely. So Tehillim are their Psalms. That's part of the Tanakh. And the Chumash is the first 5 books, which is the T part of Tanakh, of the Torah. Except usually a Chumash is something like this, which is used to both have the Torah reading and what we call the Haftarah, which is a selection taken from the prophets, excerpts. So it's put together to make it very easy to keep up with the weekly readings. So yes, the Chumash is a wonderful resource to have. But I do, and Tehillim also are amazing and beautiful poems and great spiritual insights. But the rest of the Bible is still good to have. Exactly. Because each of the books are so rich, you'll find each book as its own volume with its own commentary and explanation. If you look right over there, you'll see there's like a blue set and then like a tan set. Each one of those books is one of the books of the Bible, right? And some of them, like the Book of Esther, if you were to write it out as a book, would be that thick. But with the commentary, it gets much thicker. So you'll often find individual parts of the Bible as separate books, but it's good to make sure you've got at least the whole package somewhere. There just was a good translation that just came out for the whole Bible by Robert Alter. He just finished translating the entire Bible. It's one of the first times in a few hundred years that one person has translated the whole Bible. Usually it's a committee that does it. He is a very good literary person, so it has a great literary style, and he has some very interesting notes throughout it. So if you're looking for a copy of the whole Bible in fairly modern English with some nice insights, but not too much, his translation is very good. That's Robert Alter.
The
Yes.
books that you say, for example, the history of the Jews.
Yes.
Do you have it here? So
We don't. We don't have a lot of booksellers, book buyers that come to the synagogue. Some of these you can find at Barnes and Noble. All of them you can find on Amazon.
and the author, the same that
So which one?
the history of the Jews.
That's Paul Johnson.
Paul Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. But this is the 21st century. And as much as I love books, I love the fact that I have all of those books and more in my pocket because that means I don't have to carry the library with me when I am out and doing whatever I'm doing. So we've got some online sources. Number one, Sefaria.org. I don't know how people were rabbis before this because it is such a convenient resource. Sefaria.org, Sefaria.org, is the best online resource for classic Jewish text. This is your free text go-to place. Right? This isn't people writing about books. These are the original books, whether it be the Torah, whether it be the Siddur, whether it be Mishnah, Talmud, all these other books. Most of the most important classical ones have been translated into English, which makes it very easy. If you just want to, go to the book of Judges, chapter 1, verse 1, you just go click, 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 and there it is. But the part that is amazing is that when you go to Judges 1, chapter 1, verse 1, and you click on it, on the side, there will be a list of all the other commentary or other places that verse is referred to throughout the rest of Jewish literature. So it's all cross-indexed, and all the commentary is there. Now, not all the commentary has been translated yet. This is a nonprofit group. It's volunteer-based, so they only translate as much as the volunteers can do. But for the Torah, you'll find maybe half of the commentaries have been translated, and certainly almost all the important commentaries, the most central ones, have been translated. So you remember I talked about the commentator's Bible? Sefaria will do much the same job. Now, it's not as pretty as having it all laid out on one page, and you have to jump back and forth rather than just looking on the same page. So there's definitely a benefit to having a real book, but this one you can actually keep in your pocket. They do have an app, Sefaria, and it has everything from the website, and you download it once, and then you don't have to worry about it sucking your data when you're checking at anything. So it's really a really amazing resource. Can't recommend it enough. Hebcal. As I mentioned, we got a lot of holidays. We've got Torah portions that we read each week. How do you know what it is? How do you know what holidays are coming up? Hebrew calendar, Hebcal, is the place to go. It is, again, a nonprofit, privately run. One guy takes care of this and has the whole thing set up. And it's got your calendar references, so you can look up what the holidays will be for the next 50 years. It has all of the start times, for example, of when the sun goes down, when you light candles, or when the sun is, or when you light for the end of Shabbat, or other things like that. We'll talk about all those. If any of the words I'm using are confusing right now, that's okay. It also has a list of what the Torah readings are, so you'll know what are we reading this week. And Hebcal will have the whole breakdown for you, and conveniently have links back to Sefaria, so that it'll take you to the right section for what you can read. And also, if you ever were wondering about the dates, so what was the Hebrew date in July 4th of 1776, you can plug it in and it'll tell you what that was on the Jewish calendar.
Do you have apps for this?
Not for Hebcal. Hebcal you can just go to as a website. So if you have your phone and you just bring up your browser, you can go to Hebcal and it works just fine on a phone. The other thing you can do, of course, is you can get a calendar and then you can export it and put it right into your iTunes calendar or your Google calendar, and then it's in your phone too. So, all right. But the internet's not just for reference. The internet also has great teachers out there. You probably know that I've got a whole bunch of material on YouTube. There's also 1,000 other Jewish people out there on YouTube. In fact, there are so many people out there doing both YouTube and podcasts. Sometimes it might be hard to know, first of all, are they any good? And second of all, which one should I start with? Well, I have to say that the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies, which is where I went to school, has excellent podcasts and excellent resources online, and that's ziegler.edu. aju.edu, and that is the Conservative Seminary in Los Angeles. And the teachers there are many of the same ones that I had, and they put out great material. The Jewish Theological Seminary, jtsa.edu, also has great resources. That is the main conservative movement university in New York. And they have even more material available because they're a larger institution, and really top-notch, some of the best rabbis in the world doing classes there. They also have online resources that are not podcast or video, but are written. So again, another great resource. There are other resources as well. So these are the Seminario Rabbinico Latinoamericano. I always work on trying to say that correctly. This is the rabbinic seminary in Buenos Aires. Judaism is not only a United States thing. The conservative movement also has a rabbinic school in Latin America, in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. And they have many Spanish resources as well. If anyone is interested in additional Spanish resources, I also have some documents and PDFs that I can't read, but which I am told do cover a lot of very useful material. It covers a lot of very useful material. So if you let me know, I'd be happy to send that to you. The Rabbinical Assembly, the rabbinical.assembly.org. This is the website for the Organization of Conservative Rabbis. Now, there's lots of stuff on their website that's for rabbis, but they also have a lot of information that is about Jewish law, and especially their section about responses, which are questions that people have asked and the answers that have been given by some of the greatest rabbis in the 20th and 21st century, is fascinating. It might be a little advanced for people that are just beginning, but sometimes it's nice to know that other people have asked the same question you've asked. Pardes is an organization that's in Israel. I recommend going to the elmad.pardes.org site. You can go to pardes.org if you like, or actually I think it's .il.org or something like this. It's an Israeli site, but the Elmad part, elmad.pardes, Pardes.org, that is their main learning portion of their website. They also will run seminars and classes, and you can visit and do courses of study. Highly recommend. Ziegler and JTS also do distance learning and on-site learning for short and longer periods. But Pardes does a phenomenal amount of podcasts, which if you're the kind of person who listens to that while you're exercising or while you're doing other things or driving, it's really a great resource. Their section on Jewish history is absolutely amazing because it is able to go in great detail. We're going to cover Jewish history in this class, but we're going to get like 3 weeks worth. They can give you about 40 like 2-hour-long lectures on Jewish history. So it's much more in-depth than I'm going to be able to give you in this class. And they have many other topics covered as well, whether it be Jewish ritual, Jewish law, Jewish culture. It's really a great organization. It is traditional, but inclusive. It's not quite the conservative movement. It's a little more orthodox than that. But if you asked Orthodox people, they would say it's not Orthodox enough. So it sort of falls in between the gap. But they do great work. We had the pleasure when we took our congregational trip this last summer of stopping by and studying with them as a group for an evening. And they did a great job. We were talking about Israeli history. MyJewishLearning.org, one of the first of the, .com, one of the first .com Jewish sites back in the 1990s. The website has not been updated much since the 1990s. It's not the slickest looking website, but it has a lot of information, and they do a very good job. Judaism 101 is even more old school. I always think they're going to have like little animated GIFs going around the corner or whatever, but it's got a good general site. And then last but not least, Wikipedia. I know that people love to hate Wikipedia, but really, unless you're going to the web pages about the modern Israeli issues, where politics gets in the way of actual information. And even there, it's not too bad as you might, not as bad as you could have been. Wikipedia has a great amount of brief and usually accurate information about Jewish topics. It's not 100% reliable on everything, but if you want to look up, when did Rabbi so-and-so live, Wikipedia is a great place to start. And also, I don't think I have it on my list now. There's also a website out there, I have to add that for next time, called the Jewish Encyclopedia. This was the first English Jewish encyclopedia that was written back in the early part of the 1900s. So it's out of date, right? Don't expect it to talk about like modern Israel or anything. But for anything that happened before the 1900s, it's great. It's a great resource. And it's free online because it's public domain now. So it's called the Jewish Encyclopedia. Okay, we good? Good. If you want to buy books, Amazon is great. Barnes & Noble is great. The Barnes & Nobles here in Central Florida have a couple shelves, maybe, of Jewish books. A lot of them are like, fiction or on the Holocaust, because that seems to be a popular topic. But they do occasionally have other interesting books too. But most of the books I've mentioned, you're probably going to have to order. So Amazon is a great one. By the way, if you sign up for Amazon Smile, which is Amazon's charity program, you can make Temple Israel your donee. And then every time you buy on Amazon, a tiny, tiny amount is donated by Amazon to us. So you don't pay any extra, and we get free money. So please consider that when signing up. So Amazon is still one of the best places to go for Jewish books. It's amazing, but a lot of Hebrew books or multi-language books you can't find there, or they're ridiculously expensive because they're rare. They're not really that rare. You can go to places like Nahora.com or mysefer.com or Sfarimcenter.com. All three of those are reputable and good Jewish book sites that you can find online. Some of them all of them have great Hebrew versions of many books, which eventually you may want to find, but they also have English copies of different books as well. Yes? No? Okay. I believe, yes, that was my last slide. Okay. That's it for day one. Any questions?
Do you have 4 slides altogether?
What's that?
4 slides altogether?
4 slides? What about them?
Do you have 4 or do you have more?
No, that's the last one.
Okay, but how many do you have in total?
For the whole evening?
Today?
Today was like 17 slides.
Really? I was in YouTube trying to catch up.
Yeah. No, 11. 11 slides.
Okay, I got the last 4.
And the first one was just the title. So.
Mara, I have noticed a few.
Good.
But you're gonna publish this to YouTube.
Yes, this goes up to YouTube Live, and so it should be up, as soon as I hit stop.
Okay. We cannot come one class.
Exactly. So if you have to miss a class, or if you want to check something that maybe you didn't quite catch when we were doing it, you can go to YouTube. And of course, if you have a question or I can't see it on the YouTube, you can always just call me or email me, and I'll be happy to answer in more detail. So next week, we're going to hit sort of the main beliefs of Judaism. And then the week after that, we're going to hit the main books of Judaism, where we know all these beliefs from. And then we'll take it from there. Everyone good? Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.